Hello, everybody. Welcome to Art Salon. I'm Ellie Shore, and I've been running art salons for almost 10 years now, since 2012. Art salons began because I wanted to create a group of people that lived near me and who were as interested in contemporary art as I was. And I envisioned a place where we could join together and share our ideas and our interests in the artists that we were excited by. I approached the Armory Art Center with the idea, and they loved it and agreed to host it. And so I've been doing this in conjunction with them ever since. Each art salon features one or more of the leading contemporary artists in South Florida. And because I have a really strong interest in culture and in social justice, a lot of the artists that I invite to speak here share that interest and are working in some area that addresses those questions. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our artist this evening, Kandy Lopez. Kandy has become known throughout South Florida for the portraits and cityscapes she creates in a wide variety of media, always depicting young people in urban, disadvantaged environments. In each portrait, the individual exhibits a sense of strength, power, confidence, and swagger. She sees this as gaining visibility through constructed identities, using style and fashion, and also as a defense mechanism against racism and discrimination. As a female Afro-Dominican American, Kandy says she too has adopted and performed these identities of survival. She sees herself as a painter, but says she wants to explore painting by using a wide range of materials, so that some works are collages with paper, thread, and foil, some are life-sized embroideries with thick yarn, and some use printmaking to tell their stories. In addition to her work as an artist, Kandy is an associate professor of art and design at Nova Southeastern University, and she's also the mom to two small children. She earned an MFA from Florida Atlantic University and has exhibited widely throughout Florida and the United States. Please welcome Kandy Lopez.
Hey, thank you, Elle. That was a nice introduction. I want to thank you. I want to thank Jerry for taking out the time to put this whole thing together. I also want to thank the Armory Art Center for allowing you to have this kind of platform to share, your thoughts and ideas, and also our artwork to a greater audience. And I'm very excited that this is on Zoom so that I can, partake in these conversations, because I'm all the way down here in Davie, and I know that there's people all over the U.S. Tuning in. So thank you guys for taking out the time to listen to my beautiful voice regarding my artwork. So I wanted to start off the talk by just talking a little bit about who I am and how I grew up. I think that that is an important portion of why it is that I create what I create. I recently created a piece called The False Sense of Liberty for a show that we had at Fat Village. And I felt like the title was so fitting for this particular evening, right? And for all the things that are happening within our particular country. So a little bit about me. I was born in the 80s, so I'm an 80s baby. I was born in New Jersey in a small town called Bayonne, which is a 2-mile radius town near Newark. So for those New Jerseyans out there, whoop, whoop, I'm here representing. I have an older brother who's Orlando, so he's actually over here. My parents are from Dominican Republic, and they immigrated here to the United States. My mom came first, and she was brought here, from her father, who actually got a work visa. She came legally, and she brought her brothers and sisters. And we've created this really large family here in the United States. So this is me. I'm assuming I'm 1.5 maybe. And these are all of my cousins, or I should say a portion of them. and I'm actually back here in the background. So I decided to include this picture because it has a lot to do with why I create what I create, but also the imagery that comes from these kinds of things that I saw growing up in the city really reinforces what it is that I create. So I also wanted to share that I wasn't born an artist. I tell this to my students all the time because they think that all of a sudden you become one of the Renaissance masters without practice. So I like to introduce this into my talks just to showcase that, I was a kid and I drew how kids draw, right? So we have this idea of what the sun looks like. And of course, for some reason, my son had to be cool. So he has some sunglasses on. We have those clouds that look like cotton balls. For some reason, there was always kind of like this teepee format for my houses in the way that I drew them instead of having the traditional like squared or rectangular shapes. But I continue that kind of notion when it comes to the windows, right? So we have these plus signs. My dad also liked to draw, or so I would like to think that I get some of my drawing skills or observational skills from him. So this is his drawing above mine, and this is his rendition of what I looked like at that point in time in the 90s. So what I'm going to say has to deal with environment and people that are being represented within my environment. I didn't connect the dots for a very, very long time, but grad school really helped to understand why I was doing what I was doing and how growing up in these environments really impacted my work. So I didn't think that I was going to be an artist or teach art. I, again, was born in Bayonne. I moved down to Hialeah, Florida when I was 8 or 9. I went to a predominantly Cuban elementary school where I met one of my best friends at the time, who was also Dominican, Puerto Rican, and we loved to dance. It's part of our culture. And she applied to a magnet program in the 5th grade in dance. So I joined her in the magnet program in dance. And for those that have heard this story a million times, I'm sorry. But for those that haven't, I liked to dance, but I wasn't into ballet. I'm not very much into like stretching, and my body doesn't contort to the ways that it should for a dancer. So I decided that I still wanted to continue in the magnet program because I liked the fact that we had 2 hours to create some kind of art form after school. So I decided to apply to Norland Middle School. And did I bring a picture? No, I didn't. But these are some of the images that I did within the art program there at Norland. So we did some lino cuts to, create some prints. So this is actually an image of my aunt, part of her quinceañera. So she turned 15 and they documented an image and I tried to recreate that. I also entered into some contests, which I didn't get in, but, your teachers are supposed to push you and help you build kind of that tough exterior for getting your work rejected. And then during 7th and 8th grade, we really honed into observational skills, which included a variety of mediums. So I wanted to introduce these 2 pieces so that you guys can see that they are, again, a variety of mediums. So this is a watercolor background with pen or ink for the skeleton. And then this is color pencil. They're small, 18 by 24 inch drawings. It would take us months on end to complete the drawings, and you were never done until the teacher said you were done. So even when you thought you finished, there was always some kind of feedback given back to you so that you can actually put more time within your work. And then from middle school, I ended up applying to New World School of the Arts, and the transition from going to Norland Middle, which was a predominantly African American school, to Norland Middle, which was extremely diverse. So it was every kind of person that you can think of, even though it's in South Florida. Well, South Florida is pretty diverse. But it like everyone was in the school, and it wasn't just students, it was also faculty members. The principal at the time was Miss Brown. She was an African American lady, and that was something that really impacted me as a young person going through the motions of trying to figure out who you are and getting examples and seeing mentors that kind of look like you so that you can see that there is something bigger and better for you out there. So while I was at New World School of the Arts, we again were working on our traditional skills. It started to develop our conceptual identity. So what is it that you were interested in, which is where I picked up photography. I wasn't that great in 3D works. I tried, we had assignments, but it was easier for me to capture things in a 2D format than it was for a 3D. So I have a lot of black and white images. We did have a dark room, and we did have one of those old school cameras where you had to, learn the aperture setting and the shutter speed and all that good stuff. During high school, we didn't have the same issues that we had at Norland Middle. So again, it was a predominantly African American school. It was in Opelika, and it was considered a F school by the time we graduated, which means that there wasn't that much funding for us to create. So we got used to making art out of things that we found. So there was a lot of leftover cardboard that I had just laying around the house or whatever, walking down the street, and I found something. And we would use the materials that we had to create things. When I went to New World School of the Arts, there was materials for us, which was something that was totally different than what I was used to. So there was paints, any kind of color you wanted, any kind of material you wanted, however big your sheet of paper would have been. But I was still used to creating works from found objects. So this is one of those pieces from high school. I think it was 3 by 4 feet, and it's an image of one of my best friends from high school, and it's in charcoal and Conti. I'm not connecting the dots at this point in my life to try to figure out what it is that I'm interested in. It's just that I gravitate towards certain images that I take, and I'm trying to replicate them in a 2D format, but of course, drawing or painting. After I graduated from New World School of the Arts, I got into MICA, Maryland Institute College of Art, for a year, and then the market crashed. My mom lost her job, so I had to come back to Florida, and I ended up going to the University of South Florida. While I was there, I decided that I wasn't going to do art because, you hear it all the time. You're going to be a starving artist. Like, what is it that you're going to do with your life? So I decided to major in business. So I did business for a year at the University of South Florida. And that was a very low point in my life. I wasn't creating, and it got to the point where I had to make work. So after my business classes, I would stay out in the corridor where I lived, and I would just paint. And somebody came by and they said, "Oh, USF has an art program." And I was like, "Duh, Kandy, why didn't you research this university's art program?" So I applied for grants. I got into the art school or the art program. So I double majored. I got my BFA in painting and also my BS in management and marketing because I wanted to manage and market my artwork. So I thought that was a smart move, and it has actually helped a lot when it comes to my career. So these are some of the pieces that I was creating for my undergraduate portfolio to get into grad school. Again, you can see that there's figures. And at this time, I just thought it was, just normal people that I was painting. I didn't really connect the dots to, no, Kandy, you're painting minorities, and there's a reason why you're painting minorities. It was just something that I was attracted to. And it wasn't just individuals, but it was also things that were part of their culture. I should say part of my culture. So the swagged out outfits, or the tennis shoes, or the SB Dunks, the Nikes, and piles of them, right? So these become collector items, which is why we have a lot of people that stand in line for hours to get these pairs of shoes, because years pass by and they're actually worth a lot of money, just like paintings and drawings and now NFTs. So I was painting what it was that I was interested in, but I wasn't connecting the dots to see what it was that I was creating. When I got to grad school, with a lot of reading and a lot of researching and a lot of mentorship and a lot of committee meetings and a lot of feedback from the variety of students that we actually had at FAU, it changed my focus. I had one professor tell me what would it look like if I didn't have figures in my work. So I started making these really large drawings. So these are 5 feet by 10 feet. There is some acrylic in the background just to give it kind of like that old nostalgic look. And then the foreground is charcoal. And I would go around South Florida and take pictures of what Miami really looked like, not South Beach or the tourist destinations, but the places that people really don't think people live in. So these are actually homes and a representation of what, home and Miami means to me. So this one particularly is images from Opalaka. So there are different government buildings, and there's a street on 119th and 27th Avenue that has this bomb barbecue place, which is very well known. So I took pictures of that. I compiled the pictures together and created these huge 5x7 drawings. And there are 5 of them, and there are different locations in Miami. And the environment now started to become an important part of my artwork. So important that it became part of my MFA exhibition. So this is actually a 12 by 6 foot painting on mirrored film. That's me painting my little life away. And I was using the subtractive technique, which is basically using a roller and rolling ink. And this is actually oil paint on mirrored film. And mirrored film is what you use to tint your cars so that you can kind of see yourself inside of this space, but also not really visible. So you're there, but not there. And this particular place is in what's now called Wynwood, which wasn't Wynwood back then, which was a location that you would drive by and lock your cars. But now it has become like this tourist destination, specifically for Art Basel or Art Weeks or for Saturdays. So there's a lot of people that come and go into these spaces and take the culture with them to try to, create this cool hipster area that eventually the price goes up and you kick out the culture. So my work also deals with gentrification within the fine lines of environments. So there's always power lines that end up coming across within my work. The power line is something that's really important to me because it's showcasing the power of the city, the power of the culture, and also the power of the people that are part of this specific environment. And then I also want to represent the figures to not be completely attached to the environment, but to show the environment through them, because you are, where you grow up, you have these special situations and experiences within your life that really reinforce who you are as a person. So it was important for me, for my audience members to be able to go into that space so you can walk. It was a tight space for you to walk through and be a part of the environment, but at the same time, not really be part of the environment. And having a piece like this in Boca spoke volumes to me, because the audience is totally different from having a show at like MoCAD in North Miami. So it was something really special. So my work started to develop conceptually from grad school, where now I was connecting the dots. I was looking at figures. I was trying to understand why I was attracted to people that I considered had swagger, which someone who's hip or cool, has a sense of fashion. Everybody can have their own interpretation of what the word swag means, but for me, that's my definition. And the environment sometimes was part of the figure and sometimes it wasn't. It's like the person wanted to stay there but shouldn't. They probably didn't feel safe there, or they were trying to do bigger and better things, or so we kind of have that relationship that's going back and forth. And as you can tell, I have a lot of females within my works. I had a question the other day with one of the talks that I gave that asked me why it was always a female being represented, if I see myself through them. And I think it's a way for me to, not that it's art therapy, because that's so damn cliche, but it's a way to put myself in these particular spaces and what would that look like or feel like. Maybe it's a way of understanding who I am as a person and how the environment reads back to me, right? Or talks back to me. To the point where now I'm thinking about cutouts and silhouettes and how we are made from these spaces, and again, how they interact with who we are. Again, power line is super important. It's close to the heart, at least for this particular cutout. This was actually unintentional. It wasn't something that I was going to show my committee in grad school, but I kind of liked the peekaboo effect of the background, so I kept it, and then it started to repeat in my work. So this one is 35 by 27 inches, and it is a monotype print. And it carried me again to these kinds of silhouettes where now the cables are, this one particularly is not choking the figure, but it's holding the figure back, or maybe the figure is trying to bring its city forward, where you can kind of see the background, but it's still a little bit foggy, and you know that it's a female, and it might read as a minority, but not really. So it's kind of like this figure that you really don't know who she is. This is 18 by 24 inches, and it's a collage. So I'm cutting through a calendar magazine and repurposing some of the environments. And I'm also taking, pictures within Miami. So still this is evident with, let me see if I can go back. This particular piece right here, right? So sometimes I carry on the same kind of environment in different pieces because they either fit or it just reads nicely to me visually. A lot of my collages just come up subconsciously. It's not something that I'm really thinking of. It just happens. Oops. So these are experiments. I did a lot of experimentation after I graduated from FAU. I got a job at Daytona State College, a tenure track position. Very, very lucky and blessed to have gotten that position. And while I was there, we had a studio where I would spend, most of my time, if I wasn't teaching, inside the studio cutting collages and silhouettes and thinking about fabric, but not really stepping into that realm yet. But this was kind of like the introduction of thinking about how fabrics and the color of fabrics can play into the role of the silhouette and what it means to stand out in a place where you don't. And these shadow boxes actually have 3 layers. So this person is on the glass, and then there's a layer of the floor and the background, and then there's the middle layer. So there's 3 layers, which this picture really doesn't do it justice, honestly. But the only way to see it is in person, or if I would have rotated the picture sideways, but then you can't see the full frontal view. And these are 8 by 10 inches. They're not that big. And again, they're experimentations. And then again, thinking about removing the figure. Does it still feel like a place that you know? And also playing around with printmaking in the same realm as collaging. So the background is a ghost of one of the prints. So I would often have a ghost print that I would cut up or use for another piece, for example, this one. And then applying string, right? So just like the ones that are happening here, there's also thread that's coming through to create the power lines. Because I didn't want to draw on the cardboard, I wanted something that looked a little bit more 3-dimensional. Same thing over here. So we have kind of like these threads for these power lines. So they become something that's consistent within my work as well. And reading a lot about the history of this country and how the country was built and how the country continues to be built off of the backs of minorities, and particularly the role of women and minority women within the United States and just, humanity in general. So looking at ancient women figurines and how that can come across without really telling the full story. So this is what happens with my work. So once I feel like I have figured something out, I get bored with it. So yes, I did all those collages, and yes, I've been painting for a really long time. So I wanted to try a new medium besides, I have also taken photography. I've done some ceramics. I'm not that great, like I mentioned, with 3D stuff, but who knows, I might pick it up later. So I would end up going to like a craft store or come up with these ideas while I'm sleeping. Maybe they come as dreams where I write in my sketchbook, or I end up going to Michael's because I want to, I don't know, make somebody something. So at Michael's, there was this really tiny canvas that was 6x6. And I was thinking about fibers and I was using thread. I just didn't know how to connect the dots. And this was on sale. And the thread was right next to it, which was also on sale. And I'm like, let's see if I can create a figure. Again, this is 6x6 inches on this canvas. So let's see what that looks like with color, because I've been working with a lot of monochromatic images and I just want to see if I can get kind of like the same swagger effect with color. So I started off small. So this is 6x6, and then I got a little bit bigger and also a little bit more sloppy. So I'm like still trying to figure out how to tighten the thread in the background. I should have had a picture of the background so you guys can see the hot mess behind this one. But this one was 18 by 15 inches, so they're getting a little bit bigger. And then they got just massive. So I wasn't going to use thread, and I was like, oh, I can do yarn. It's closer to thread. It's a little bit thicker. If I'm going to use yarn, what kind of background or ground am I going to use? So I had to do some research, and I thought about plastic yarn, or plastic canvas is what it's called, which you can see in this picture that it has those little holes in them so that you can thread the canvas in the back, which you can kind of see here. So there's a lot of editing that ends up happening within this process. So I end up getting the plastic canvas and I draw on it. So you can kind of see like the blue grid. I do not grid though. This is just how the plastic canvas is sold. It has kind of like these blue lines. This particular image is 7.5 by, I want to say 4.5 feet. So it's pretty large, and it's an image of my husband who is standing in the streets in Little Havana. And this is actually the street that he was standing in. So I just wanted to experiment to see if I can actually create a bigger figure and how would that look like in yarn. I was also thinking a lot about the history of the country, like I mentioned, and how we are invisible in this particular area or time. Well, we have been for a really long time, but I wanted the environment to still be a part of it, but I kind of wanted it to be a little bit faded out. So again, this was another mini experimentation, and what ended up happening, so I would draw it out, yarn it, and then paint. But because there was holes inside the plastic yarn, as you can see, my paint went through the back, and I knew that was going to happen, so I put a sheet of paper behind it. And I put Yupo paper, and this is the result of having the Yupo paper. This was a nice, happy accident, because not only is it talking about this idea of invisibility and not being seen, but you can also see the background and the silhouette. So it's incorporating all the things that I'm interested in within one shot. So it's two pieces within one. And I've had trouble figuring out how to showcase these works until the last show that I just made, which you'll see in the pictures coming up. But as you can tell, it's like really tiny, tiny dots that are creating this image. And again, it's 7.5 by 5 feet. So they're pretty large size. And it also should remind you of like chalk outlines or silhouettes, right? For people that have passed away. So it talks about those kinds of issues as well. So this was in 2016. So between 2016 and this year, I was working on collaging, going back to drawing and painting, playing around with those kinds of medium and really trying to figure out what it is that I was interested in. I knew that I didn't want to do any more monochromatic images. I kind of wanted to start playing around with color. So I got a residency. I got 2 residencies this year during summertime. I also have 2 kids. So Between these two time frames, I have a 3-year-old and I have a 19-month-old, and they are gorgeous, just to say. But I also had to work small because I was pregnant most of the time. So I try to stay away from painting with oils, which is what I love to paint with, and also creating smaller works that I couldn't do at night if I got some sleep the night before, right? Because it's what you need is some sleep. So I created these images during my residency in July. I went to Hambridge and I already had a plan. I was excited because it was my first residency, and I worked my ass off for 2 weeks nonstop to the point where like my body was in pain, because it's really hard to work on these. I'm 5 feet for those that know me, so I'm really short. So to have pieces that are this big, I also have a Napoleon complex, so I think that I'm bigger than what I am. And my works tend to be big as well. I also like them to be big so that they command attention. And I think that the color has also helped to command that kind of attention, not only with the body language and the pose, right, and the gesture and what she's wearing, but also color. So this is all yarn. This is just a close-up shot. Again, 7.5 by 5 feet. I was thinking of showcasing these on the floor where people can actually walk on them. So you're literally walking on the person. And this is also the material that you would use for rugs. So to create a rug, again, you would use plastic canvas. So I was debating on how to present these pieces. And again, when I paint the background, it ends up coming up with the little dots. These are just the aftermath, which now becomes Invisible Sue. And then this is just a close-up image of that 7.5 by 5 foot piece before I put in the background. There's white paint on there, so I'm assuming that I painted a little bit of the top of it. This was the second piece that I created during that same residency. I also wanted to play around with not having a background, and this one's entitled Brooklyn Betty. So I found Brooklyn Betty on Instagram. I knew Sue because Sue is my husband's best friend's wife. So it's usually people that I know and people that I know who know people. So I'm usually like stalking people on Instagram, not only looking at artists, but also looking at people. So I end up talking to them and letting them know that if I can use some of the images that they have taken. And Brooklyn Betty's images are on fire. She's very much into fashion. I also like that the name was Brooklyn Betty, so it's showing you like where she's from. Unlike Sue, who is a compilation, at least for the background, of the city of Miami. She is Jamaican and she came here very young. So she's lived in many areas in Miami, so there's a compilation of the background too. So now I'm thinking about the people that are actually represented and how they come across. I also wanted to experiment with, again, material. So I spray painted gold in the background. So this is why you kind of have that like vintage yellowish tint in the back. And I wanted there to be a connection between the gold and what she's wearing. So this is actually a really large or long, like a sweater, a knitted sweater, where the inside is a different color. Again, yarn. So I was having a lot of fun creating these pieces, and this ended up being my installation. So the powerful figures end up being on the wall, and then the silhouettes or the invisibility versions of them are on the floor where people can actually step on them. For those that know me, I'm not too precious with my work, so I'm okay with the fact that people are stepping on them. It's creating a statement on its own. And I also like the juxtaposition between having something that's so powerful in your face, but then again, having that vulnerability show through at the bottom and talking about topics that are very relevant for us. And then this was my second residency during summertime. I don't know what I was thinking. I was just applying to stuff and seeing what would happen. My poor husband with my children, but we survived. So this residency was actually in Paris, Tennessee. And again, I wanted to play a little bit with the background. So this is black spray paint. 7.5 by 5 feet, just so that you guys can have, some kind of reference to how large these pieces are. They take me about a week to a week and a half to complete each thing. That's me working 6 to 7 hours every day on them. And this again is Brooklyn Betty. So I had, title it Brooklyn Betty 2.0. If you guys have Instagram, check her out and just, tag me so she knows that I'm sending you her way. I was really interested with this particular image in the shapes and color. I wanted to push myself, and I also wanted to play around with a variety of yarn. So it's not just that it's orange, but there's like little pieces of yellow within the orange. There's little pieces of yellow within this burnt sienna color. So I already have ideas for the next ones that I plan on create on my next residency for summer 2022. So I'm excited about that. I'm thinking about bringing in some fabrics and tying in some yarn and thread just to start building out shapes and maybe creating the city from those shapes that I make, or cutting them out or collaging them. I'm not sure yet. I have to plan it out. But this is my most recent piece. And again, I spray painted it. And one of the things that I really loved about spray painting, I spray painted on the grass. So the grass has, the terrain is uneven. And when I spray painted it, some of the areas didn't showcase the holes while others did. So it kind of feels like this meshy effect that happens around the figure, which can tie back into fabric, or it can be a whole mess of other things that are a little bit darker. But I was really excited to kind of see the edges of the spray paint going around the figure. I have to be really particular on how I'm spraying the paint. So I'm also really into graffiti, but I haven't tried it. So that might be something that comes up later on. And then while all that is happening, I am also applying to shows, and I want to make new work for every show that I apply for, that I get in. So the False Sense of Liberty was one of them. And these are actually the images that I took while I was driving around and still drive around South Florida in areas that people tend to avoid, like the Poke and Beans or Liberty City, Opelika, Little Haiti. There's also a little bit of Newark on the side. So my father used to live in New Jersey. He moved down 2 years ago, but I would go up there and also take pictures to kind of connect the dots between the two cities. And the Statue of Liberty became really prominent for me. So again, I was born in Bayonne, New Jersey, which you can see the Statue of Liberty from across the bay. And because the town is 2 miles radius, you can see it from wherever it is that you're driving. And we were pretty close to the river. So it was something that I saw growing up. And it also comes back full circle within my work. And Fraction happened during, or the planning of it during 2020. So this should actually be 2020, not 2021. But again, I'm going back to kind of like that cardboard, finding different images and collaging these two things together and trying to talk about gentrification and city and feeling invisible within your spaces, and showcasing kind of like that grit that ends up happening with living in the city, and wearing the mask that you have to wear to be able to survive in these particular areas is really important within my work and who I am. And I think that was my last slide.
That was wonderful and fascinating. And yes, there will be questions. I think you have opened up a discussion about race, which other artists are certainly addressing, but you're addressing it from a very unique perspective, as far as I can see. And that is the personal performance of your subjects. I am so happy that you're finally speaking, Kandy. People don't know this, but I've been inviting Kandy to speak for several years now, and she's been teaching on Tuesday nights and couldn't do it until now. And this year her schedule changed, so yay.
Yay.
Good for us. Have a wonderful holiday season, everybody. A Happy New Year. We will see you in 2022.